Good morning, Donnie.
Hi, good morning.
So the beginning of our presentation will just be a quick chat, fireside chat between Donnie and myself, and then I believe you do have a presentation about enhancing cybersecurity for CSPs. If you don't mind, I'll just dive into the questions unless you want to introduce yourself, say anything to start.
No, that's fine. So I can begin my introductions when you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I know you work a lot with DDoS Landscape, the distributed denial of service. So let's begin by asking, how has the DDoS landscape evolved and how has that impacted community service providers today?
Okay, so yeah, this is Donnie. So I work with Nexusguard. I've been with the DDoS industry for more than 10 years now. So we are in the business of providing DDoS mitigation to our customers. So over the years, we've seen a lot of changes in this particular aspect. Yeah, I still remember 10 years ago when we first got into the business, providing this DDoS mitigation as a service for our customers. Back in those days, we could just spend some money, buy some on-prem appliances off the shelf, and then we put together some bandwidth and provide this as a service to our customers. But fast forward 10 years today, the world has changed. So as internet infrastructure continues to be upgraded, more contents are to be served and consumed. So we see multi-hundred gigabit attacks becoming a regular thing. And then, of course, with the implementation of new infrastructures like 400G backbones, and of course, the 5G networks that we have been hearing about in the world today, I think it is inevitable that we will see even larger attacks. We're talking about terabit attacks as a norm today. So what this means for service providers, communication service providers, ISPs, data centers, hosting companies, this means that their existing technologies, that they invested, 3 years ago, as short as 3 years ago, a 40G box that would have costed them millions of dollars, is no longer relevant in today's landscape, where like I mentioned, attacks that we are seeing on a day-to-day basis, they are in the triple digits numbers, hundreds of gigs, and not to mention the occasional terabit attacks that we've been hearing a lot of, and then increasingly, and we will continue to see a lot more of this. So it is, evident that the pace of growth of these attacks is now outpacing traditional solutions that we see in the market, both from a capability perspective as well as from a cost perspective. So this means that Nexusguard as a business, we had to custom build our own true hybrid platform to keep up with this trend for our customers as well as for ourselves. So over the last 2 years, we spoke to hundreds of CSPs, ISPs, and that we learned that the cybersecurity issues such as DDoS are causing them strategic business impacts. On one hand, while cybersecurity are not typically traditional CSP's core competency, okay, and the revenue by itself might not help move their revenue needle much at all in comparison to their core services. But on the other hand, they are starting to see that now cybersecurity services are now intertwined with their core offering, and the customers are now expecting such services to be simple basic offering that they should be providing. So now CSPs are caught in a spot whereby these cyber threats are growing at a pace that is too hard for them to keep up with because it's not really their core competency. But at the same time, they find that they can no longer ignore it, okay, and they have to provide a solution because that's what their customers are expecting. And if they do not, they are just simply left out of the picture. They are not offered tender renewals and given the opportunity to continue serving the customers as they would. Yeah. So this has been a major change as we have seen over the years.
Understood. And I know that there have been a lot of accelerated cybersecurity trends and attacks in the last year on a global level, but what do you think are some of the challenges and trends unique to the APAC region, the Southeast Asia region, and what can organizations here do to address these trends and challenges?
Okay, so unlike the US or the Europe, where the carrier market, telco market, ISP is all mainly used by offered by a few large carriers, very large tier one carriers. The APAC region is characterized by many smaller service providers and carriers. So instead of 1 or 2 or 5 large carriers, we're populated with very many countries as well as many providers. So from a technical perspective, this makes internet routing much more complex and challenging because of the different peers, different providers, having to navigate peering relationships between the many different providers. And then coupled with a large variance in cost of bandwidth, we are talking about, as cheap as a couple of dollars per meg in certain regions and, hundreds of dollars per meg in, just across the border. So this price variance, and of course, with difference in laws and regulations, in keeping traffic within the countries, the CSPs operating in Asia need to consider many factors when they are trying to, deliver a solution or even creating a solution to protect themselves and their customers, and all the time keeping their costs low. From a market perspective, so a lot of these Asian nations, like I mentioned, have some form of laws or regulations that restricts and tries to keep their internet traffic within their own borders. This is what we see what we call the breaking out of the internet. Countries are setting up borders, preventing their traffic leaking out of their country. So this has created a situation whereby, in the past where a regional or global CSP, okay, with a solution, with a data center that has the capability to scrub traffic, say, for example, in Thailand, is no longer able to, extend that service out to their customers in Vietnam, okay, because of obvious regulations issues, especially when it comes to industries with much more sensitive data. We're talking about governments, we're talking about, financial institutions, so on and so forth. So this means that now the APAC market are much more fragmented, but at the same time, it means that it also opens up opportunities for the smaller and the local service providers to now be able to step up, okay, and to try to offer a very differentiated service in trying to take advantage of that new trend that we are seeing.
Yeah. It's interesting when I speak to people in the cybersecurity profession. Our conversation always starts off with the sobering reality of the threats and like the different data protection laws that are maybe handicapping some market growth. So let's switch and think about some of the solutions and positive developments. Are there any solutions specifically for CSPs that they tend not to invest in that you think are particularly helpful in today's cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. So this typically, as is the case with CSPs, communication service providers, telcos, carriers, based on their market capitalization on the existing connectivity services, layer 2, layer 3 services, they try not to get involved in providing services outside of their core competency. So they try not to get involved in security or application related services because it's kind of not along the same kinds of discipline. It's an entirely different domain that requires different sets of skills and resources, a different team, and of course a totally different approach because this is a very high touch service. It requires a lot of customer engagement, and there's a lot of obligations as well as legal requirements, and it's a very high touch, very involved service. There's SLAs to contend with to make sure that availability is constantly at a very acceptable level, as well as to make sure that all the attacks and threats are to be filtered out, so on and so forth. So over the years, we've witnessed many providers try to launch such services unsuccessfully because they were not able to successfully navigate the challenges in the creation, the productization, the delivery of such service, just simply because of culture fit, product fit, and resistance within the organizations, as well as it being a totally different kind of approach for customers. So we believe that as mentioned earlier, and I will continue to emphasize this, that is no longer something that they can overlook and ignore. Customers are not expecting their carriers, their providers to be able to offer security services. It's actually part and parcel of everything that we do nowadays. Security is everywhere because of obvious threats that we see around in the internet. So I think what we've seen changing is while they have the hesitancy to actually get involved in such offerings, they are now starting to open up, and we've seen a lot of these carriers start to build up their own kinds of MSS services as well as cloud services in a bid to differentiate themselves, stay relevant, stay in the picture, and then of course ultimately is to protect their revenue and to grow their company.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I'll just ask one more question to wrap up. But in your opinion, why do you think this is, and how should CSPs overcome the difficulties in implementing such strategies?
Yeah, um, so we've been in this business for a long time. So DDoS and cybersecurity, like I mentioned, is a very different breed as opposed to the connectivity services that CSPs are used to providing. So there are many challenges. If I may, I will actually try to answer this question better with some slides that I've prepared. So
Oh
allow me
yeah.
to share a screen now.
By all means, you can proceed with your presentation. I will just turn off my video, but it was great to have this chat with you, and you can take over with the more technical stuff in the slides now.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Caroline.